Okay, so I wasn't planning to do this, but the opening of the Tokyo Games just finished and I have a lot of reactions. So I decided to make a little video. I hope it becomes little, telling a little bit what I thought and also giving some impressions of someone that actually has been or watched other openings. Yeah. So to really get already into it, well, first you can see that I cried a lot. I don't care. I did cry a lot. I thought it was emotional. And of course, again, I was very emotional because I wasn't there. I have been at the games since Athens 2004 when I was a volunteer, but maybe I'll tell about this in another video. Today I want to talk about the Tokyo opening. And first I want to say, opening of the games encompasses a lot of protocols and traditions. And these are not the same things. So protocols are actually things that are meant to be followed or respected, whereas traditions are, well, traditions. They have done like this in other games, so they keep doing it, or because it is polite to do this way. That's why sometimes it gets a bit, I would say, slow for whoever is watching, but that's because the organizing committee is always trying to follow those protocols and traditions. And yes, it is the responsibility of the organizing committee to put together the opening ceremony. So they always start the opening with this little bit of history. As you could see, they were talking about first the fact that Japan already hosted other games. It was the first worldwide televised game, so they're very proud about that. And then they talk, a little bit on how the society in Japan formed and evolved. It's very, very, very quick, but that's a little bit the idea. And then you kind of go straight into the presentations of the National Olympic teams. Why am I saying National Olympic teams? Because if you realized, it's quite discreet, but it's not the nation that represents itself. It's the National Olympic team, which could be something different than a surveying country. I will give you an example and you understand what I'm talking about. England, which is a surveying country, and it has a football team of its own. So within the Football Federation, it has a team that plays for that sport, but it has a Great Britain National Olympic Committee, meaning that English and Scots and etc., they all play under the Great Britain flag, right? So the list of countries that take part in the Olympic Games is not exactly matching the list of countries in UN, for example. So I hope you got that. So it's about 200 to 205, if I'm not mistaken, that go into the games. There was something that I wanted to talk about now, which is more the clothing that the teams go into the stadium. Why I wanted to talk about that? Because, first of all, because I really like to pay attention to this whole fashion side of it, but also because this is part of the tradition. So the protocol is, for example, the order that the National Olympic teams go into the stadium. Always, 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 Greece goes first. Why do they go first? Because they are the birthplace of the Olympic Games. So that's their honor. They always go first. And then they are followed by all other National Olympic teams in alphabetical order in the language of the host country. Hence why today it was Zimbabwe, one of the first countries, and I don't know, Malaysia, and then even Brazil went all the way to the back of the list, because in Japanese, it's not how it's spelled, or the order is not like this. And then second to last, it's always the following nation that will host the games. So for Tokyo, the next nation will be France, will be Paris 2024. So they went second to last. And then the last nation is the host country, Japan. Like in 2016, it was Brazil going last. And then in principle, all the fans make a big party and it's super fun. I thought it was very sad to see the athletes walking in and nobody celebrating that. That's a shame, but it was necessary, so I agree it was the best decision. And I also want to say that I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of delegations were quite small. Why? Because they were asked to try and not bring as many people, not to, in case to agglomerate the number of people that would be in the stadium. In any case, you should note that they are invited to come to the stadium for the opening. It's an invitation. And the athletes, when they are part of the games, there's a lot of things they have to respect. But in this specific regard, it's of course an honor and a privilege to go, but they're not obliged, unless maybe they're obliged by their own national committee, but that's another discussion. The point here is, for example, if I'm an athlete and I have swimming and the next morning after the opening of the games at 7 in the morning or God knows what time, maybe tonight I want to be preparing. I don't want to be in the stadium, as cool as it is to be there. You see what I mean? So sometimes that's why a team might send 200 athletes and there's only 150 going into the stadium. Also, not only athletes go into this into the stadium. It could be a member of the technical delegation team. It could be someone from the National Olympic Committee. They also go sometimes together. It depends a lot on each National Olympic Committee. So that's one thing. But going back to the clothing, which is what I wanted to talk about. Traditionally, they used to dress a little bit more formal for this ceremony, because it is in the end a ceremony. It's a formal event of the games. This has been changing, of course, as in fact society fashion has been changing. And before, there was this tradition that the women were wearing skirts and the men were wearing full suits, hats, because of course everybody used to wear hats. They are summer games, so sometimes it's hot, so there's all these little details, again, tradition details. And this is my opinion. It's a video on my reactions and my opinions, but what I thought was very curious and in fact really cool is that a lot of teams, in fact I counted 75, had for this time exactly the same uniform for men and women, which is, I find, really interesting. That doesn't mean that I don't find interesting also when they have different ones and when the women are wearing dresses or skirts. In fact, there were beautiful ones. I will mention here a few of my favorite ones. But just to say that I think in terms of a message, I think that's a strong message, that some teams are concerned about showing this gender equality. I am phrasing like this. I'm not saying that these teams came out and said that, but I am phrasing like this. Perception-wise, watching an opening like this, I can say, wow, a lot of teams are making their athletes even. And then within this, that I'm calling like even uniforms, please note that some of these teams decided to do formal even ones. So for example, a few teams had full suits for both men and women, and trousers with the suits, which I really liked. A lot of them I really liked. And some of them had full track suits for everyone. A lot of the Caribbean teams, by the way, which are sponsored by Puma, had that option. Full athletic gear, which could be also an option. It's normally the clothing that they wear on top of their performance athletic gear, if that makes sense. Okay, I could step aside here and make a little parenthesis on whether that reflect on budgeting of the National Olympic team to dress the team one way or another, but I'm not gonna, although it could be an interesting point. But I will say though that there's some teams, this is a moment where the team is not only saying we brought athletes, but we brought our culture to these games, which is uniting the world. And sometimes this is a way of passing that message a little bit further. For example, when they invite Stella McCartney, who is a partner of Adidas, to do the whole Great Britain team uniform and to say, you know, I dress this team and she's an important household name in the UK. So, you know, these kind of little nuances, which of course I know Stella McCartney because it's a big case, but maybe that could be also that in a little country in Africa did the same with the name that's very important there, and I'm not mentioning here. It could be. So 75 teams, both clothing, same clothing for men and women. Information one. Then we have the flag bearers, which is another part of protocol, not tradition. So the protocol states that someone will carry the flag and all the flags will be together. And then it happens because they do in the village as well, all the flags. So when each team arrives on the village, they also have a flag ceremony in the Olympic Village as well. But then, you know, during the opening, that's when all the flags also get together in front of the world. This time, which is also something that I think it's a bit of a Tokyo agenda, again, my opinion, they also ask for 2 flag bearers for each national Olympic team, being one man and a woman, which I loved. Although it does make weird 2 people carrying one flag, I thought that was TV-wise not fantastic all the time, but in terms of the idea, excellent. And speaking of clothing, I hope you noticed that some flag bearers also have completely different clothing than the team. And this came even more across because you had a couple driving the flag in front of the team. Particularly, I do want to mention a few that were my favorite, because there were not so many, although there were quite a few that had this difference. But some of my favorite, if you want to Google and see it again, definitely Afghanistan, Angola, Indonesia, Eswatini, Kazakhstan, Cook Islands I really liked, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Sri Lanka, Solomon Islands, Tajikistan, Niger, Bahrain, Tuvalu, Dominica, New Zealand, Burundi, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Bhutan, Marshall Islands, and Jordani, and 2 more. The next guy I'm gonna mention is, or the next country, actually, it's Tonga. And I wanna say the guy because he became quite famous. Pita Tofua, one of my favorites. I follow him on Instagram. I think you should too. He's the guy, if you will, something comes to your mind, is this guy who came the first time completely traditionally dressed, without a t-shirt, carrying Tonga flag into the stadium, and he did it again. It's the 3rd time actually that he comes. He's also competing now for both Summer and Winter Olympic Games, so a fantastic athlete. And he's really like a case of the Olympics, of a viral Olympic photo. But this year, the last one in the flag bearer list that I'm gonna mention is Vanuatu. Please note that also they came fully traditionally clothed, fully shirtless, and I think they are asking Pita Tofua to move over. Really Google it. That's my tip for you. Moving on, because I think I got a bit heated now. Moving on to the different clothing. Again, I don't want to say, I think it's very interesting that the clothing are different. I don't want to say that just because it's not the same, it's a problem. It's not a problem, it's a choice. But because we have been discussing beach volleyball, hand volleyball, athletic year as well, maybe this is also an important discussion. That said, quite a few I really liked. And I think they do make a beautiful case of, you know, women coming in fully dressed in dresses and skirts, and even men, you know, in full suits. I think that's very interesting. For example, Google or remember that today Jamaica, Spain, China, Denmark, Macedonia I really like, Serbia, the women they were also very beautiful. Hungary, Finland, Belarus, Nepal, the women had quite long skirts, so it was very beautiful for me. Mongolia were also very beautiful. Haiti, Liberia, and Luxembourg. I really thought these were quite interesting, different but very beautiful presentations of formal uniforms. And then you also have amongst those who are different but came a bit more traditional. For example, because I didn't write them all down, but if you see Seychelles or St. Kitts and Nevis or Palestine, they were all very traditional and very beautiful and very different, the men from the women. Continuing on the clothing, I spoke before about the hat. The hat used to be part of the tradition, also because of summer games, also because of the formality of, you know, the 30s and the 40s when we were having these presentations. In fact, I want to do a parenthesis because opening games and a lot of the traditions that come with the opening games and with the Olympic protocols come a lot from Hitler, if you can believe it. Because when Germany hosted the games in 1936, for him it was very important to show Germany as he wanted to be seen, right? As this amazing nation above all nations, excuse me. So he was one of the first to put in place this kind of, you know, everybody goes into the stadium, everybody salutes me, which is not him, it was the whole committee, but you know, in fact, they were all coming and either doing the Heil Hitler or just, you know, again, another parenthesis that I will close because this also, we have a lot of history, even also in Olympic shooting, meaning actually broadcasting, that he also started. But that's not the point for today. But I want to go back to the hat, because think that in the 30s, again, in the 40s, it made a lot of sense for men and women in a formal wear to have the hat. Nowadays, not so much. So it's debatable. Why should they carry this hat in the whole, you know, luggage? Not to wear except for the opening. But I did notice that some are very beautiful, some are typical. For example, Madagascar, they didn't have a hat, but they had something on their heads, which I'm sure it's quite typical for Madagascar. I also noticed, maybe because I am Latin myself, that a lot of the Latin teams were wearing hats. We also have this tradition of wearing hats during the summer. Could that be also another reason why they're keeping the hats? It could be. So Chile had a hat, although men and women with the same clothing. Puerto Rico also were wearing hats. And then in Slovakia, the women were wearing hats, but it was a sporty hat. So it was not a kind of Panama hat. It was a sporty cap, in fact, which I thought it was very interesting. USA already did that once, but you know, this I thought it was very interesting for Slovakia. In Mexican team, they were wearing the flower tiaras. If you notice, the women was very beautiful, I felt. In Mongolia as well, the women were wearing very beautiful, very thick tiaras, and the men were in hats. I thought that was very interesting. And keeping on the accessories, also again, within the tradition, a lot of teams used to do that before, and now not so many. In fact, I only noticed 2 teams carrying fans. So Botswana and Poloni, I saw that they were wearing fans or carrying fans, which I thought was very interesting. And the last comment I will make in accessories is that the USA, they had handkerchiefs as part of the uniforms. And if you see, especially because there were a lot coming into the stadium, some of them put in, you know, in their heads, some of them put around their waist, and some of them were waving the handkerchief. I thought that was quite cute, personally. So that's a lot, almost 20 minutes already. within clothing and teams presentations. I really enjoyed. Again, I have the patience to be looking 2 hours to the TV to make all these these little comments. Of course, it's different from someone that has been inside the stadium. It's a completely different feeling. Of course, every time a country comes in or a team comes in, there's always a fan there. Always, the smallest team that you can imagine, there's always a fan in the stadium. So there's always, you can always hear a somewhere in the stadium. It's super fun. It's a different kind of emotion. It is interesting watching on TV, but of course I can understand that it can be tiresome for someone who really doesn't care about St. Kitts and Nevis. Particularly, I love it, but yes, it is quite slow because it's part of protocol. Favorite moments of the team's presentations was Ireland coming in and bowing to the volunteers, in fact, but to the stadium. The party that both Argentina and Portugal made coming into the stadium, there was a lot of energy in both teams. Italy, they came in and their uniform has like a pizza that it's half the Japanese flag and half their flag, or kind of full their flag. It's super interesting. I recommend you take a look at it. The joy of the flag bearer of Ghana. I mean, this is a photo for the Olympics, I feel. The smile that she has on, I felt emotion just looking at her. Uganda dancing when they came in, that was very cool as well. And of course, the best for last, Brazilians coming in with Havaianas, so not even athletic shoes. They were coming in thongs, in Havaianas. And they were doing the samba. I love that. Brazil has a huge delegation in the games, but they decided to only come with the two athletes, the flag bearers, because in respect of the COVID regulations and also to preserve the team, to preserve the athletes. But in the village this afternoon, or this afternoon in Japan, actually, they did do a little parade. So there are photos online if you want to follow that. I really thought that was cool. And I hope more teams did it. Of course, I'm following Brazil, but I'm sure more teams parade around the Olympic Village. I will say a few things that I didn't like. I didn't like that I saw 3 teams not wearing masks. And I am sure the organizers asked and probably even will sanction somehow these teams. So I was very surprised. I'm not going to mention which three teams were, but I was surprised with that. Although, of course, once they are into the stadium, there's very little the committee can do. I also saw 3 delegations that were only men. I don't want to be unfair. There could be a situation of some of the women staying behind in the village and not taking part of the opening. But still, I think if I was, again, part of these Olympic national teams, I would try to keep the number of athletes a little bit more fair, or even, not fair, but even. And that said, I also did see 1 team of only women. So, you know, maybe this balances out a bit the situation. It's still on clothing. I will say my favorite ones. I will leave Brazil aside. I still want the Havaianas for Christmas. But I really did love a Latvian team. They were wearing this kind of silver skirt and this transparent jacket. Gorgeous. Of course, I'm biased in this as well, but Germany, gorgeous Adidas kit. If you notice, when Germany was coming into the stadium, the Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC, stood up. He is German, he is an Olympic champion, and he is the president now. So it's more than natural that he stood up and waved and clapped. I really loved Montenegro. They were all wearing full red. I really thought this was impactful. Bermuda team, not only they were wearing Bermudas, but the men were wearing pink Bermudas with big black socks. I thought that was very stylish. Burundi team, they were all full traditional. I really think they were like on point with that. The Samoan team, the men were wearing skirts. Now, I don't want to be insensitive because they might not be called skirts. I'm not saying this with any judgment. I thought they were amazing, so I'm saying this as a positive, and I hope they are also called skirts and they're not part of any other traditional like the kilts or whatever. But I thought that was very beautiful uniform for the American Samoan team. I also loved the Bahamas team. I also love the South African team. I don't know how well we could see it on TV, but if you notice, it had a little bit of a zebra and animal print in their clothing. Again, you know, bringing their tradition into the formal uniform. I love the long Lacoste jacket from the French team. Again, Lacoste, big name for France, doing the French kit. I really, really like the big long jacket that they were wearing. I also liked two more things. I liked that I saw my teacher when Switzerland came on, Dennis Oswald, who is an IOC member, stood up and he was shown on TV. He was my teacher in Neuchâtel for my master's, so I was very proud. And I also really liked that the Russian Olympic Committee were presented like this. So they are not going as Federation of Russia, which is the name of the National Olympic Team. They are going only as Russian Olympic Committee after a CAS decision, which is the arbitrary court here actually based in Lausanne, because of the suspension they had on doping. Again, this may be a subject for another video, that's not the point here. But going back to the clothing, I thought they were trying to marry a little bit the Japanese tradition, because they were wearing something that looked a little bit like an obi around their waist, if you pay attention. Particularly, I liked that little nod to the Japanese culture. I hope that's why I hope it was intentional. But again, not speaking of the doping or anything like that today, anyways. Continuing, so we have the presentation, we have all the countries, that's the biggest part of the opening, and then we have the speeches. The speeches used to be separated, so first the athletes would say that they swear to play fair games, then the coaches would swear that they would fairly coach all the athletes, and then all the referees, they would make a little speech saying, I mean, always someone representing each of these communities, right? And normally from the host country, they would take someone from each of those communities to represent and do this speech. I really liked that, again, this time, instead of having one representative, they also picked a couple for each of those speeches. And very recently, they changed that, and instead of doing each speech separately, it is all speeches, all three speeches together, and they all swear by the Olympic values, let's say. So I thought that was very beautiful. Then, of course, you have the speeches of the president of the IOC and the president of the organizing committee, which I personally thought were moving, were I don't even want to say moving only, but I want to say fit for the games, because I don't think they were either extremely happy, oh, we're having the games, it's so amazing, so they were respectful to the moment that it should be, but they were also thanking the Japanese people for having the games, and they were celebratory in the way of saying, in the end, this is the work and life of so many people, not only the athletes, but everyone that lives around the games. So there is a joy for them to be back at work, you know, the same as people that were at home, they're going back at work, is also the same joy. So I thought it was very much in the correct tone, even though president of the organizing committee. I thought she was quite emotional when she was speaking, which was very beautiful. So I really enjoyed both speeches. Then you always have the Olympic flag, the Olympic anthem. You always have, you could see there were kids. They always try to bring a little someone from the community, or this little choir from the community that represents the nation and the students of the nation. I thought, again, part of the tradition. Then you have a moment of peace. You have the White Dove release. This is a tradition that started in 1920, but it finished in Seoul, of the releasing of, just live birds in the middle of the stadium. There is some jokes in the industry of, birds dying with the Olympic flame or whatever. I'm not sure. Thank God I was not working at the games at that time to see if any of those are true. But ever since, after Seoul Games 1988, there is always a representation of this moment, which represent not only peace at the games, but in principle, Olympic truce. And if you follow the news, you will have seen that even Tedros Adhanom, he came out also to ask people for Olympic truce, which is a tradition of the ancient Olympic Games, so before the modern Olympic Games, that during the Olympic Games, you would make truce and no nations will do war, will declare war against one another in respect of the values of sports and of the games. So this time, if you saw, there were a lot of little white doves, paper falling into the athletes' heads, the athletes that were already in the middle of the stadium. I really like that. And then there was this very little cute moment with the pictograms. Pictograms are a representation, a visual representation of each modality and discipline of the sport. This maybe I can do a video only to explain the federations, and some federations having a few sports in the games and some federations only having one sport in the game. I could talk about that too. Doesn't matter now. It only matters that Mexico, which, by the way, personally, I think design-wise was the best games, or one of the best. Mexico 68. Anyways, they started this tradition of doing these little visual keys for you to understand each sport, also because then it would be printed in your ticket. So it's a way of signage, of international signage, which has been carried on ever since, and in particular in the last few years, very much tailored into the branding of each game. You could see very much in Athens the whole pictogram that looked exactly like the ancient Greek drawings. In Beijing, it looks very much like the Chinese calligraphy. And this time, it was super interesting. It's emojis, it's the electronic version of the pictograms, which is also a first for the games. I thought this was amazing, and I love the way they represented in the show. It's a shame that the dancer let the racket fall at one point. But I mean, just a small detail. But I was excited when I saw this. I hope you were too. This was very cute. And then they were also having a cute moment with actually with an actor and an athlete, showing a little bit the venues. So if you've never been into the games, I don't know how much you understand of how it spreads out in this whole city, and sometimes even in other cities, which is the case of Tokyo even, because of course the surf is not going to be played in Tokyo downtown, it's by the beach, is another little village, and etc. So this happens often in games, and all these arenas or spaces that either it can be more than an arena. It could be maybe a meadow, square or something. There are many things. They're all called the venues of the games, and then they were presenting the venues of the games in the TV. Even for us, even I've never been to Tokyo myself, you could get a little bit of the feel of the city. Once you are a fan in the city, that's the fun, is finding the venues and finding how to get the metro around and going in China and understanding the metro that is closer to this stadium or that stadium. That's a little bit of the fun of being an Olympic fan. So I really enjoyed that because it got us a chance to understand a little bit more of Tokyo. And then I really didn't want to make such a long video, but then we're coming to the end because that's when we have the Olympic flame being lit. I could also do a video only on Olympic flame and all the symbolism and why it travels around the world and where is it and how do they start the flame and why do they have to do a certain way. It doesn't matter. It's more the symbology of this flame being carried around. It's also this feeling of peace and respect and fair play and excellency and friendship being passed around. In Greece, they even had a song, no? Unite the flame, pass the flame, unite the world. So that's really what it's all about. By passing, the flame one person to the next, the point is that you spread out this message of Olympic value. So that's normally the end, and normally you do have fireworks. I really loved that on top of the fireworks, they had the moment with the drones, which is a very, very, very interesting new thing in events, to have that instead of having fireworks all the time. So you had the drones, you had all representations many times, of course, of all the continents, but you had one representative of each continent singing Imagine, which I thought was very emotional, very beautiful, very suiting for the tone of this opening. And I think, after it was, again, each cauldron of the flames for each games represents one thing. This time it was meant to represent the Mount Fuji with the top of the sun going down. Very beautiful message. We had the tennis player lighting it up, and the fact that she's Japanese mixed race, that's a very interesting point as well, because she will be the image of the opening of the games, not only in Japan but everywhere else. That was very beautiful. So this is all of my reactions. I think I made it up to 40 minutes now, but I think I'm someone that is very in love with the games, and I was watching it very intently. I don't know, again, I was not planning to do this, but it gave me great pleasure to share this with my phone, at least. So I'm happy to talk about it. I love to talk about it. Again, these are my opinions. I'm not working for anyone that would have an interest in this or a conflict with this. So I think if I can say something, it would be that, again, of this is the opening of the games. Let's enjoy the games. I'm sure it will be beautiful. In the end, what we want is the best for the athletes. They represent, again, excellency, and they represent maybe somewhere that we could all be as human beings. So beautiful, beautiful opening. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did.